But when it came to the heart of the turnout machine for the Democrats, older black voting blocks, they went with overwhelming numbers to the establishment pick. We must take a cold, hard look at why that happened. Yeah. I want to tie this to the Vox article that came out about this PAC that I've been meaning to talk about, the Welcome PAC, and how much they're pumping this shit. Eric Levitz wrote about it. The Democratic Party has spent the most of the past decade deciding to lose, or so argues a new report from Welcome PAC, an organization that backs center-left candidates so as to build a Big Tent Democratic Party. Democrats literally looked to their electoral defeats over the last decade and said, we got to go back to the drawing board. Okay? And guess what they found? Lo and behold, this might come as a surprise to you, but it turns out what the Democrats hadn't done was be centrist enough. Okay? That's what it was, guys. Since Bill Clinton, we got to get more centrist. It turns out that was the problem with Kamala Harris. Now, the annoying part about this is that there are two truths and a lie hidden, because I read the outline of this report, okay? And at first I thought to myself, okay, there's some reasonable takes in here, like focusing on affordability. But it turns out the Democratic hucksters and tricksters were simply just saying, oh, focus on affordability, but also say, fuck trans people on the side. Come on, man. Because there's two problems here that they do not understand. Okay? There's two things that you are supposed to be constantly paying attention to if you are in either major party. There is the leading by example and messaging in a direction where you can swing the electorate back to your side. And then there is and then there's obviously the easy gimmies that you can get. Now, the easy gimmies that you can get are left populist economic positions that center around universality. Okay? That's how you bring the broadest base of support back to your side. The problem is these guys are not leaning heavily enough in that on that stuff, because this is, once again, a lot of consultant speak to tell Democrats what they have been doing already, which is, rest assured, when we say affordability, we mean like marginally advancing the cause of expanding the affordability of healthcare, right? Like nothing that is decipherable, nothing that is definable, nothing that is broad-based support for Medicare for all, for example. Okay? It is ironic that this Welcome PAC report basically says Kamala Harris actually fucking did a banger job and still lost. In general, macroeconomic management, while very important to incumbent party success, is just a legitimately pretty hard problem that lots of reasonable people end up disagreeing about. Much harder problem than figuring out whether unpopular stances on, e.g. crime, hurt electorally. If forced to choose between adopting economic policies that poll well and those most likely to actually work, Democrats should ignore the polls, says Simon Bazelon, the leading author of the Deciding to Win. Isn't there a tension between delivering the electorate's preferred outcomes and appealing to its policy instincts? For example, tariffs often polled well before Trump actually implemented them. Yet when his tariff raised prices, voters turned against them. So what should Democrats do when the imperatives of good governance and electoral expedience come into conflict? Basically, this report says having a left populist position on economics is like having broad-based support for left populist policies. And I can't believe they're using tariffs as an example here, because tariffs is the stupidest fucking example, right? But let's not use tariffs as an example. Let's use Medicare for all as an example, because this report is antagonistic to Medicare for all. Okay? Because Medicare for all is unfortunately a mover and shaker that would cause mass disruptions in the American economy, Democrats will never get on board with it because they're, one, terrified of what that would do in the interim while being implemented, and two, they're terrified of what their corporate donors would say and do. Okay? They are worried about the money faucet running out. private healthcare in this country is a massive, massive sector. It has ballooned our GDP, as you have seen over and over again. I've talked about it, right? It is an unnecessary middleman that literally does not need to exist at all. And at best, it should be a marginal factor, right? Heavily regulated if it exists at all. And yet, these guys don't want anybody to even broach that subject matter. And I always say to Democrats that will listen that if you don't have an understandable, easily digestible, easily definable message on this issue that so many Americans are frustrated by, Medicare for all or universal health care, whatever you want to call it, single payer, whatever, okay, then you're going to lose. Democrats need to understand that this is both good politics and good policy, okay? It's good policy because it helps people. It's good governance because it dramatically restructures the healthcare system here in this country for the betterment of all Americans. It's good politics because it's something that Americans broadly want, okay? The eradication of medical debt, which is non-existent in many other comparable OECD nations, is a major burden lifted off the shoulders of the American working class. And it's also less costly to the Americans anyway. By and large, the overwhelming majority of Americans under a single payer program would pay far less in taxes as they currently do in insurance premiums. And yet, for some weird reason, everyone seems to turn a blind eye to this reality. Okay? Can you name a policy that's good but not... Can you name good policy that's not good politics? Sure. Let me think. What's an example of a good policy that's not good politics as it stands currently? Universal housing, gun control, significant gun control, universal housing, reparations. That's another good one. There are plenty of examples. There are plenty of examples of good policy that's not, for the time being, good politics. Okay? Safe injection sites. That's another good one. Right? No private schools. That's another good one. Expanded public transit is good politics and good policy. You're wrong about that. Yeah. This is how the New York Times described a conference hosted by the group who wrote the report. They self-identify as an anti-populist, anti-left. It's their whole deal. And it's extremely bad faith and insulting to everyone's intelligence to act like they are anything but this. At CPAC of the center, Democratic moderates beat up on the left. At a wonky gathering in Washington, centrist Democrats argued that they were the majority makers. The party needed to take control of Congress in 2026 and beyond. It does not suggest... Here, Matt Iglesias. The essay argues that Democrats should, 1, pay less attention to their donors' demands from left-wing policy on climate and social issues, 2, raise tax on the rich to expand the welfare state, and the left populists hate it. This is Matt Iglesias and Adam Johnson duking it out over this report that came out. Okay? I don't know why these people don't understand that you can de-emphasize social issues without turning your back on social issues. You can run an economics-focused campaign without sacrificing social issues. It's just a matter of what you prioritize. Exactly. That is always my argument and will always be my argument. Your front-facing approach should be universal programs that seek to eliminate the harm that as many Americans as possible are experiencing. Because trans people are not magical, mystical beings that do not actually suffer under market conditions. Black people are not magical, mystical beings that don't have to care about the cost of rent increasing. Right? Neither are white folk. Okay? They're not. They need these problems solved too. So your front-facing approach should be solving these economic issues with universal programs. And then once you bring those people on under your umbrella, then you tell them, yeah, we're not compromising on this shit. Like, you want healthcare? Great. Trans people are going to get it too. You want healthcare? Great. Black people are going to get it too. Will there still be people that say, you know what? Fuck it. I don't want healthcare if it means black people are getting it. Of course there will be. There are a lot of stupid people out there. There are a lot of people out there, but that doesn't mean you don't need those people to win an election, is my point. As opposed to what the Democrats are doing right now, which is not running with universality as a first principle, not running with like broad sweeping reforms, radical changes that will restructure the American economy in the direction of solving some of the harm that Americans are broadly experiencing, regardless of their color, creed, background, ethnicity, religious identity, whatever, right? Bernie had a big issue with black people because he didn't do that. I don't know how many times we have to relitigate this, but Bernie Sanders on the vibes front had a hard time reaching black people, okay? He did. But the reality of the matter is it wasn't because he was refusing to push for policies. It was because he was getting an endless faucet from the Democrat turnout machine, an endless faucet of smears presenting the guy who literally did go out and get arrested during the civil rights struggle, okay, for black people not, I think it was about housing, right, during the civil rights movement. He didn't explain it well to the local communities. I don't think it was necessarily, I mean, it was definitely a fault ultimately of the campaign for sure. But I think we have to dramatically take a look at the ways in which the establishment media machine and the Democratic voter turnout machine actively said that Bernie Sanders was not trustworthy. The reality of the matter is that plays a big role. Don't do that, Hasan. That's a white take. He did that civil rights march 100 years ago. No, here's the problem. Okay? I'm not using that as the primary reason to say Bernie Sanders is on board with the current existing black struggle in the United States of America. I'm saying that voters are very malleable, right? And voters are very malleable in the sense that, like, they can overlook establishment Democrat failures and then hyper scrutinize candidates, left flank candidates that are considered bad. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Like, because like Hillary Clinton. Do we actually think Hillary Clinton is pro black people? Like, I don't think any of us in this community feel that way, right? And yet, black people certainly thought so. And there's got to be a reason for that. And I think that reason was because the media machine and the turnout machine actively suppressed the negative associations with Hillary Clinton and black people in her background. If they were to have turned the scrutiny machine in Hillary Clinton's direction, I think a lot of people would have probably focused on the economic solutions. This dude is his own biggest enemy. He communicates in such a way, an ass way is so easy to clip him. He's the most clippable man on this planet. Wait, what do you mean? I'm saying I don't think Hillary Clinton gave a fuck about black people. She didn't. She had a lot, and neither did Joe Biden, but there was already a lot of existing charitability from black voters for both of these candidates. They were known and recognizable establishment Democrat candidates. That's it. That's it. I wasn't using this as an example for, Bernie Sanders's phenomenal work as far as like, black liberation goes, and then how little black people cared about him and how dare they, how dare they attack him or whatever. I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that at all, because I think ultimately it still is dependent on the campaign. And the campaign objectively failed in reaching a large number of especially older black voters, because Bernie was actually cleaning with younger black voters in all of the primaries. But when it came to the heart of the turnout machine for the Democrats, older black voting blocks, they went with overwhelming numbers to the establishment pick. We must take a cold, hard look at why that happened. Because as far as like vibes goes, yeah, Bernie's vibes probably remind a lot of older black folk of like a elderly white curmudgeon, and that he did not have enough charitability in these voting blocks. He just didn't. And I think a big part of the reason was electability. The electability argument is a very strong argument, because black voters, by and large, especially older black voters that still have respect for the Democratic Party because they can remember a time when the Democrats actually ate up political and social defense of black people's right to be able to vote or desegregation, right? They recognize that both parties are comprised of racists. It's the devil you know versus the devil you don't. That's the calculation in many circumstances. Okay? That's the calculation. It's not like black voters don't know that fucking Hillary Clinton or even Bill Clinton is not like, I mean, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were, they know that. They know that both parties have candidates that are genuinely, or at least to a certain degree, exhibiting white supremacist tendencies. It's more so about harm reduction narratives, which work. My boomer parents are like this, very risk averse politically despite progressive beliefs. Yeah, I'm willing to bet there are even plenty of people across the board on the MSNBC watching constituency that probably like what Bernie Sanders was saying, but thought, well, people don't want to vote for that. People are not progressive enough because that's all they saw on their television sets. You feel me? That's it. My people are not used to expecting good things. Yeah, there is that as well. That nihilistic tendency that many voters already have. In any case, I can't believe we got here. We were talking about something else. Take this excerpt from the article, then compare it to the median voters in the game you just played. Does this jive? I think both Biden in 2020 and Harris in 2024 showed us that voters are evaluating candidates in large parts on their record over a period of several years, not just 3 months before the election. Yeah, that does make sense. Anyway, there are 3 different versions of make the rich people pay higher tax on the list of good popular policies. What's important is that the specific things candidates do and don't embrace, not what elite-focused factional label they put on it. Adam Johnson had a lot of choice words for this article when it first came out. He said, oh, wow, another billionaire-funded data guy who's come to the conclusion that the problem with the Dems is that they're too far left, which worked out well for his billionaire donors because it would have been super awkward for them if the data showed left populism was the answer. He directly tackles the people that were responsible for this report here by saying, this thread, somewhat cravenly even for this genre, blames nominal support for Medicare for all among Dems as damaging the Dem brand, which is objectively nuts, but expected when you're funded by a Walton Hare, a Murdoch Hare, guy who visited the Jeffrey Epstein Island, and Bain Capital executives. There's about 9,000 of these soul-searching astroturf projects right now, as I wrote about last month. Another one is Abundists. Okay? These guys love writing. These guys, These guys love writing about how the best possible thing to do for the Democratic Party is to stay the course on third-way neoliberalism, but simply restructure the way you're messaging third-way neoliberalism. Okay? That's it. And the way that Matt Iglesias and his contingency in the consultancy class has realized the way that they can tackle the third-way neoliberalism issue, which dictates that you don't actually offer people radical changes at a time when they're very clearly demanding it. What's more radical than Donald Trump? Like, they were so stupid enough to believe that Donald Trump would actually present this radical change, right? Are actually demanding reasonable centrism on the economic front, and also a complete abandonment of social issues. The problem is, when you do that, you are always going to lose to the Republicans, because the Republicans can always turn around and still present you as being woke as fuck. Pay less attention to the donors' demands for left-wing policy on climate and social issues, raise taxes on the rich to expand the welfare state, and left populace hates it. If you want to go further on left economics than DTW argues, that's fine. But the logic of that is you need to go even further right on other issues, but it's impossible to get people on either side of this debate to own up to any of the trade-offs. It does not suggest meaningfully expanding the welfare state, and no one reading it would think this. It degrades and asks push-pull questions against Medicare for all, free college, and universal child care while paying lip service to modest tax increases and expanding healthcare access, which is true, okay? That is precisely what this report did. When they ask people about Medicare for all, they falsely claim that Medicare for all would increase your taxes by 20%, okay? That's what this new PAC presented. And then they turned around and said, see, people don't want Medicare for all. which is an incorrect assessment of what Medicare for All does. Medicare for All, at the end of the day, would cause people to pay less overall. It would be a substitute where you actually pay a higher percentage of taxes, but pay far less in premiums and get health care for free at the point of care. You would pay less in taxes than you do in premiums. And yet, they never presented as such. What Matt and Welcome is trying to do here is use the report's token reference to increasing the minimum wage to a now laughable $15 an hour and expanding healthcare access, whatever this means, as cover for the other 95% of left-punching and right-wing policy formation. The Popular scam is predicated on a totally selective, donor-pleasing prioritization of what issues we focus on that are supposedly popular. This is achieved through glaring omissions, Gaza, DOD cuts, and push-pull questions. Would you support Medicare for All if it killed puppies? Yeah, their uncle who works for Nintendo told them Gaza was a non-factor. Just trust them. Not even worth mentioning because something salience about something domestic issues. Yeah. As a matter of fact, it's even grosser than that for the record, because I looked through the numbers and I looked through what they were presenting. They cynically don't bring Gaza up at all. But you know what they do? They looked at Rashida Tlaib being censured. And they said Democrats that were in favor of Rashida Tlaib being censured are actually better off overall than Democrats who did not. That was the only connective tissue to the Gaza issue at a time when the Democratic Party's base of support and broad popular base of support have completely shifted away from Israel. So the very fact that this report only broaches the subject from the most cynical framework possible implies that they are not a serious PAC that is genuinely invested in trying to identify what people want. And if the Democratic Party broadly listens to this welcome PAC, they will continue losing. What must be done for the Democrats in the upcoming elections is to have a radical, broad, sweeping economic agenda. Hyper focus on the bread and butter issues, hyper focus on the kitchen table issues, healthcare, housing, affordability, okay? Free healthcare, dramatically expanding by government mandate the available units of housing, okay? Build fucking houses. Federal jobs program to build the fucking houses. Federal jobs guarantee to build the fucking houses. If you did that, if you advanced that cause, then people would be so focused on what you can do for them that anyone that turns around and says, well, what about trans people, will look like silly bitches. Because even the most cutthroat transphobe still needs housing. Okay? Even transphobes and racists need health care. And if someone is choosing transphobia over free housing or free education or free health care, let them do it. But there are a lot less people that are that invested in transphobia and that invested in anti-blackness that they would literally cast aside bettering their immediate material conditions in favor of advancing a white supremacist agenda. And you don't need everyone. You just need the majority. That's the beauty of democracy. That's it. And in the absence of that, easy to understand, definable policies. You'd be surprised? No. I'm not surprised. You want to know why I'm not surprised? Because people are still mad at Donald Trump right now. Donald Trump's numbers on affordability have on the economy have plummeted. Why have they plummeted? He already is advancing the anti-trans agenda. He's advancing the anti-immigrant agenda. And yet his numbers are still plummeting because there's only so much distraction that will cause people not to recognize that their pockets are still hurting. Do you understand? It's that simple. Because if what you said, if your assessment was correct, and I still understand why you have this cynicism in your heart, because you are inundated with all this fucking racist nonsense on Twitter and online every single fucking day. But if that was the case, people would be broadly happier, now that their fucking white savior, the great white hope, is back in charge. And yet he's still fucking up the economy. He's still fucking up people's pockets. That's it. A lot of people voted for Donald Trump because Donald Trump presented an argument of economic prosperity by attacking vulnerable populations. But he still presented an argument of radical change in economic prosperity, whereas Democrats never presented economic prosperity at all, and they were broadly seen as business as usual. This was made worse by Kamala Harris's inability or lack of interest in decoupling herself from the dead weight around her neck that was the Biden administration. Now that prosperity has not come, people are angry. This is a major mistake. Yeah. Trump's approval rating his new low for second term poll. I saw this. The poll conducted this past weekend shows Trump 19 points underwater, with 39% of Americans approving of his handling of the presidency and 58% disapproving. The negative 19 net approval is the lowest of his second term, even though he's seen approval rating dip to 39% in the past. Last week, the president's net approval was negative 17, with 39% approving and 56% disapproving. The week prior, he was 15 points underwater. YouGov pollsters noted the president's negative 19 net approval is also lower than all but one poll during his first term. Trump's approval is down across all age groups, but young adults have seen the most dramatic drop-off in approval since the start of the president's second term. Every single thing that I predicted would happen is happening. I told you this was going to happen. I told you why young people and low-propensity voters were voting for Donald Trump as opposed to Kamala Harris. And that once Donald Trump was president, they would run away from their previous considerations. Okay? And I have a policy of not faulting the voters in this regard, because ultimately it still comes down to bad messaging on the Democrat Party front. It's funny how the Democrats are still hated more. Yes, because the Democrats haven't done shit until this last government shutdown. The Democrats are terrible at messaging, and they, for the first 9 months of the presidency, didn't do anything. They were just constantly fucking bullied by this dickhead. So at a time of tremendous unpopularity, the Democrats still can't take advantage of the media landscape. Among 18 and 29-year-olds in the latest survey, Trump was nearly 55 points underwater, with only 20% approving of the way Trump handles his job and 75% disapproving. Look at that. How is that possible? So it turns out that Donald Trump banning the 49 trans athletes from participating in NCAA competitions wasn't a real mover and shaker after all. Interesting. Who could have foreseen that? Who could have foreseen that? It turns out it was simply a distraction, albeit very harmful to the trans people, but a distraction nonetheless. Meanwhile, Democrats are still talking about how, yeah, we got to abandon trans issues altogether. We've lost the argument there. We just got to abandon it. You don't. You don't have to do that at all. You only have to do that if you are going to refuse. If you're going to openly refuse to put forth a radical transformational agenda on left flank populist economic policy provisions. That's it. There's a clear lane for purple state Democrats to appeal to GOP voters by bashing Trump's complete failure to regulate AI, Trump's betrayal of the U.S. agricultural industry, Trump's move to ignite a new war with Venezuela. Don't know why more Dems are dodging this. Trump's in hot water with base voters after quadrupling Argentine beef quotas. But the bigger problem is America can no longer feed itself, and consolidation across the farm economy keeps prices high. On the output side, yeah, meat prices have fucking skyrocketed. On the output side, the top 4 meat packers buying American cattle control 85% of the market as well. The solution isn't giving them more foreign beef to manipulate prices with, said Dan Osborne, the independent Senate candidate from neighboring Nebraska, who has been highlighting the issue. The solution is breaking up the monopoly and enforcing antitrust laws we already have on the books. By contrast, Osborne's opponent, Senator Pete Ricketts, has said nothing on this issue except parrot the words market-based solutions repeatedly. This squeeze has created a ridiculous situation where America imports substantial amounts of food despite having vast amounts of highly fertile farmland. While some commentators have pointed to Argentina only totaling 2% of total beef imports last year to say that quadrupling the quota won't create any problems, the larger point is that a record amount of beef comes from abroad and prices are still high for shoppers. That's what needs to be reformed, Scholten said. Our food system is in serious danger. 90% of Iowa food is imported. It's the same in Indiana. We grow all of this, but for whom? Who's making the money here? It's not the farmers, it's the multinational corporations. We are used as pawns. It's fucking insane. There are so many issues with this capitalist hellhole design of our current free market economy. And I say free market in air quotes. And no Democrat wants to address that because they're fearful of their big donors. They have to drop that shit. If they want to fucking win, they have to bully the donors. And it is clear that Donald Trump is capable of bullying the fucking donors and making them genuflect. He did it to the entirety of Silicon Valley. It's so stupid.